Okay, hello everybody. We are planning to finish the eighth Perek tonight with God's help. So we are on page 88, and here's a quick outline. Topic of tonight is wastewater. We talked a lot about drawing water into your home and different ways of doing that. And now we're going to talk about getting rid of water through a drain pipe. And in some cases, you need a cesspool within your courtyard. So that's the common denominator of most of the topics tonight. So let's jump right in. Here, Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, lo shanu ela lemalot aval lishpoch asur. So we were talking about the Mishnah mentioned this chute, right? If I have a balcony and I want to draw water up from the water below my below the balcony, so I need to make a chute. That makes it a reshut hayachid, and then I can draw water within this reshut hayachid and bring it into my own reshut hayachid. So that's fine. However, this is only if I want to draw water up. But if I have wastewater from inside the house, then I am not allowed to pour it down the chute. That's what Rabba bar Rav Huna is teaching us. Okay, good. So matkifla Rav Shizvi v'chima ben ze leuka. Rav Shizvi challenges this. This seems to be similar. Why not? It seems to be similar to the next Mishnah that we're about to learn in a few minutes. The next Mishnah talks about the following case that we'll see in detail. If you have a courtyard and you want to throw wastewater into it, if the courtyard is 4x4, then that's fine because it'll get absorbed into the floor. But if it's smaller, then it's a problem because then it's going to run off into the Shut Harabim. So if you have a small courtyard, then you need to create a cesspool underneath so that the wastewater will go into the cesspool. And from there, it can be gathered, and eventually it will go out to the Shut Harabim. So you see, in this case, you are permitted to throw the water down into, well, isn't this kind of like a chute, right? So how is this different? How come in this case, although it's small, it's the same as a balcony up there, and I am allowed to throw the water into a hole, into a pool on the bottom. And in this case, you say, I am not allowed to throw the water down, wastewater down into the chute. That is the question that he's asking. So his answer is, Hane taimeh, v'hane la taimeh. The waters that are poured in the courtyard will most likely be absorbed in the ground. The courtyards are just made out of dirt. And so it will absorb it in the ground and not necessarily run off into the Reshut Harabim. I mean, it could be if there's a lot, but generally it can be absorbed. Whereas with the water going down into the water down here where it's flowing water, then for sure it's going to go down into the water, and it's just flowing and it's going to flow out. It's not getting absorbed in the platform. And that's the difference. So as long as there's potential that it will stay within my reshut hayachid, within that courtyard, it's okay. Here, there's no potential for that. All right, so that's pretty clear. Ika de amre. Now, this whole section that we said before, Rav Huna says you're not allowed to throw it down the chute, and then we asked about it and answered. Here's a different version of that whole thing where everything is flipped. Every question is an answer, and every answer is a question. Ika de amre, amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, la tema lemalot hu deshare, lishpoch asur, ela lishpoch nameh share. Now Rabba bar Huna teaches in a lenient way. Don't think that in this case, you're allowed to only draw up and not throw out. No, you're allowed to throw out the wastewater as well. Now, so that's the version he's saying here. And then we say, Rav Shizbi, Peshita. Rav Shizbi, who questioned it before, now says, of course, why wouldn't you be allowed? Hainu uka. It's the same as the next Mishnah, where it says you're allowed to pour wastewater into the cesspool. So it should be the same thing. Oh, I might have thought in the case of the courtyard where they get absorbed in the ground, that's okay. But in the case of the chute above the water, it doesn't get absorbed. I might think it's a problem. So therefore, he has to come teach me that it's okay. All right, so we have, it's very interesting. I think they memorized the steps of the names, and he said something about there being a difference or not being. He had something about a Mishnah, and here we have a difference between absorbed and not absorbed. It just wasn't remembered whether it was whether what he said was stringent and we questioned it, or what he says was lenient, and then we affirmed it. Okay, opposite conclusions, but same form. Very good. Now, the next part of the Mishnah talked about v'chen shete gezus teraot, the case of two, this case, yeah, here, right, when you have two balconies, and one has a chute and one does not have a chute, and the Mishnah said that because this person here may try, maybe he often comes up here, and since he may want to use the chute, he prohibits these people from using their own chute, because this is like a kind of a wall between two courtyards. Imagine this is a courtyard and this is a courtyard, and the chute is a shared space. So them potentially using it will cause the people who actually have it in there up here not to be able to use it unless they make an eruv. But without an eruv, these people impose a prohibition on the upper people. That's what the Mishnah said, and let's analyze it a bit. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav lo shanu ela besimcha, aval bemufleget elyona muteret. We saw the statement before that Rav teaches that's only if they're actually very close to each other. But if they're apart from each other, even just 4 tefachim horizontally, then the top one is okay. Let's see, that's in the picture. In other words, if this is 4 tefachim away horizontally, then it's not. Then it's a separate domain, separate area, and you don't have to worry about them coming in trying to use the chute. And then the people who on the upper one can use their own chute. This makes sense because Rav has a general principle that I will not impose upon you if I have to travel horizontally, right, in order for me to access that shared space. Only if we're right up against each other, like a wall that's in between our two courtyards, then I would prohibit if we don't make an eruv together. But not here where you have it in your domain and I would have to travel or throw something to it. Okay, good. Now we're going to analyze and question this case from the following statement. This has nothing to do with wastewater. This is just a very interesting thing in itself. Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Chia v'Rav Yosef, v'Amar Rabbi Oshaya. Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Chia, and Rav Yosef in the name of Rabbi Oshaya. Yesh gazel b'Shabbat v'churba machazir labe'alim. He says you can steal on Shabbat. All right, this is not a general rule that you can go steal anything on Shabbat. What this is talking about is, let's say you live here, and next door to you is a ruin. It's owned by someone, but that person, I don't know, they left this house in ruins. Nobody lives there. It's dilapidated. And I decide one day, without permission, I am just going to go and put some stuff in there, and I start using the ruin next door to me for my own purposes, even though it's not mine. So yesh gazel b'Shabbat means that since I'm using it all week long as if it's mine, therefore on Shabbat also, I don't have to make an eruv. I can carry from my house to my neighbor's house because I already stole my neighbor's house. So I'm using it like it's mine. So even though I don't have permission, for the purpose of Shabbat, I treat it like it's mine. However, nevertheless, if the owner should come back, then I have to give it to him, right? So it's not really mine. I don't actually take it. So sometimes there are kind of contradictions that something could be legal in one sense, but not in another sense, and even in a contradictory way. It's, for example, if someone is an illegal alien in America, and yet they can get a driver's license. Right. Well, how can you get a driver's license? That means you're recognized as living here, and yet no, but you're not a citizen. And so, for the purposes of driving, yes, you can. For the purposes of even being here, no, you can't. So something like that. All right. Now that seems to be that's our first understanding of Rabba's statement. However, we say this is a contradiction. We don't like it. Ha gufa kashya. Amad yesh gazel b'Shabbat alma kanya. On the first one hand, you say yes, you can steal your neighbor's house on Shabbat. In other words, make it yours. That means it has to be yours, so it really is yours. According to that, if your neighbor comes back, you say sorry, you were way too long. Now it's mine. If you're going to consider it your own reshut hayachid. And then you said, I have to give it back to him. Therefore, I did not acquire it. So whether either I own it or I don't own it. You can't take it both ways. Rather, we're going to reinterpret. Yesh din gazel b'Shabbat. We're adding the word din. Kesad dechurba machzila be'alim. There is a law of stolen property. In other words, it's the opposite of what we first thought. If a house is not mine, it is considered stolen on Shabbat. And even if I use it all week long against the law, it's not, I don't have permission. It doesn't matter. On Shabbat, it's not mine, and I cannot carry from my house to my neighbor's dilapidated house without making an eruv. Okay, it's an interesting halacha, because if the neighbor's house, if he was away, right, then it wouldn't be a problem. But it is being used. So, right, that's the problem. But even though it's being used by me, but it's his house. See, an unused house, I wouldn't have to join the eruv. But it is a used house. But even though it's by me, but not by the owner, and so it's illegal. Okay, and so then the second part is how so? Like churba, which I have to return. Okay, so therefore, according to this, a dilapidated ruin that's next to me, I may not use on Shabbat. Even if I steal it all week long, it's not okay. Now, Rabbah said this, and then Rabbah, after he explained himself, questioned himself. Amar Rabbah umot binan ashma'atin. It's like playing both sides of a chess game. Now he's challenging his own statement from our Mishnah, which says, "V'chen shetei gizus tera'ot zo lemala mizo v'chule v'yamat yesh din gazel b'Shabbat amai asurot." You just said if I use something without permission, then it's not mine, right? It's considered a separate domain, and I couldn't use it without making an eruv. In this case, this chute belongs to the upper balcony. It doesn't belong to the lower balcony. So if the lower balcony guys, even if all week long he trespasses, but on Shabbat, he's not allowed to go there. This doesn't belong to him, right? And so therefore it should be considered a separate domain, and he of course can't use it, and he should not impose a restriction on the upper guy to use it. Because he has no right to use the upper one, he should therefore not impose a restriction upon the guy in the upper one, right? The only time we impose a restriction on each other is if we both have access to the same middle area. The guy in the bottom has no legal access to it. So that's the question that Rabbah has on himself. So why should it be prohibited? Oh, maybe he's not stealing it. This one, they made a joint ownership. They chipped in and they made a partnership. Hey, I'll pay for the half of the chute. You build a chute on your balcony. Therefore, he does have permission to use this chute. So now this is actually similar to a wall that's between two courtyards. Someone asked a few weeks ago, who owns that wall, right? So it would have to be, according to this, a wall that both of us, both sides are permitted to use. Generally, a wall is shared. Like if a wall falls down, then we split the cost of having to fix it. Okay, so it's a shared chute. Wait a second. According to that, then what if I also made a chute on the bottom one? I have a picture of that somewhere. If I also made a chute, then would that be allowed? I thought there was a picture. Okay, so now it should be allowed, because the Mishnah only said that if I didn't make a chute and you do have a chute, then I impose a restriction on you. Then I should infer that if I also have a chute and you also have a chute, then it should be okay. But according to this, it should be still a problem, because I have half ownership in your chute and I should be able to go there, but I didn't make an eruv. So how come the Mishnah was particular in saying only if I didn't have a chute? If I own half of yours, then it shouldn't matter if I have my own or not. So we answer, Kevan da'asu tachtona, kilui galeh da'ata, da'ana behadach la nicha li. Since I made my own chute, then that shows or reveals that I'm going to use mine and I'm not going to use the one that's on your balcony. So therefore, even though I chipped in half to pay for the chute on your balcony, if I have one on mine, I'm going to use mine, and I'm not intending to use the one on yours, and therefore you're in the clear. You don't have to worry about me coming on trespassing on top to your property to your balcony and using yours. And that way we resolve. Rabbi resolves his own question. All right, and now with the last Mishnah for the eighth perek, Haser Shipe Huta Merba Amot. Remember this language, less than 4 amot. It doesn't say 4 by 4, but that's the implication. It has to be 4 amot squared. In other words, 16 square amot. But it doesn't say 4 by 4, and that's going to be important later. In other words, what shape? Does it be square or can it be any shape? So let's just assume that 16 square amot in any shape. If it's a chasur that's smaller than that, en shofchin betocha mayim b'Shabbat, ela im ken asula uka mahazeket satayim min hanekev ulemata. So I'm not allowed to pour wastewater in it unless I make a collection pool, cesspool underneath, and that can hold 2 se'ah. 2 se'ah is the regular amount that most people produce in wastewater from washing and going to the bathroom and all that. That's the standard amount. So it has to hold a standard amount for a household. And min hanekev ulemata, from the opening on top below. In other words, it has to hold that much. And then on top, it has a hole where it lets out any excess into the street. Okay, so the point of this halacha is if it's big enough, if it's more than 16 square amot or bigger, then I can pour it out onto the ground and I don't care about it. It's okay. But if it's smaller, then it's a problem, because then it's going to have runs for sure going to run off into the street. So I have to have a pool that collects it. Okay, we have a law like this today in New York. That you have to put a collection pool in your backyard. The city doesn't want, when it rains, all the water to go into the street sewers all at once, because then it causes flooding. So now if you renovate your home, you have to put a giant pool holding tanks in somewhere on your property to hold the rainwater so that it can then leave in after time and doesn't flood the streets. Okay, so Mishnah is a similar law. And now ben mi bachutz, ben mi bifnim. This cesspool can be all under your own courtyard, or it can be bigger and extend out of your courtyard. Ela shem bachutz tzarich likmor, mi bifnim en tzarich likmor. The only difference is that it certainly has to begin. Part of it has to be inside, so you can pour water in there. And if it extends outside, you have to likmor, means to cover it. With some interpret it as an arch covering. Anyway, some kind of covering. Why do you need a covering? Maybe so people don't fall in, or so then you don't so that you don't pour the wastewater in the Shut Harabim, or whatever the reason. Okay, so but the pool has to start off here, then it can extend out. All right, that's the first half of the Mishnah, and now we go from there, talking about a courtyard, to a drain pipe or a drain ditch. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer, bib, that's a drain pipe, shehu kamor 4 amot birshut harabim, shofchin letocho mayim b'Shabbat. It's basically the same case as we said before. It would just be in a different shape. Here's some more pictures. So if I had something like this drain pipe, so I would put a drain ditch. So if I pour it here, as long as the first 4 amot of it are the first 4 amot are covered, then I can pour the wastewater here, and then it will continue into the Shut Harabim, and that's okay. So really, you see that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion here is basically the same case as this, except that this is throwing onto a lot of dirt, and this is throwing into a particular ditch. The Gemara is going to say that the beginning is actually was the same opinion as Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. He might be the author of this first case too. However, Chachamim disagree, and they're more stringent. They say afilu gag o chaser me'ama lo yishpoch al bib alabib aval shofechu lagag v'mayim yordin labib. Even if you have a lot of space on your roof or in your courtyard, and so that if you pour it out, it has a long time till it gets to the Shut Harabim, doesn't matter. You still cannot pour directly into the ditch, but what you can do is pour onto your roof the wastewater, and then it will slope and go into the ditch, and then from there it'll go out to the Shut Harabim. That's what you're allowed to do. You have to do it a little bit more indirectly. Okay, and then last case, החצר והאכסדרה מצטרפים לארבע אמות, וכן שתי דיוטאות זו כנגד זו, מקצת עשו עוקה, מקצת לא עשו עוקה, את שעשו עוקה מותרים, את שלא ושלא עשו עוקה אסורים. This seems to go back to the first topic of the courtyard. If you have a courtyard and a portico, in other words, a covered area, they join together to make the 4 amot. So if you have them together, 16 square amot, then you can pour water out there without worrying, because there's enough surface area to absorb it. So imagine something like this. You have a chatzer and achsad, they have a covered area and an open area, but it's all outdoor ground. That's fine, and you can use it. The other cases, second case of Mishnah is if I have 2 upper stories. I live here, you live here. I made a cesspool, and this is a small chatzer, less than 16 square amot. I made a cesspool for myself. And this Mishnah says, if I made one for myself, you can't use it. You have to make your own, right? 2 upper stories, and some made a cesspool, some didn't. Those who made it are okay, can use it. Those who not cannot. Why not? We'll see. One of the reasons given us because it's too much water, right? If I'm pouring all my wastewater and you also all your wastewater, maybe that's too much for one cesspool. All right, we're going to reject that answer, but just for now. Okay, that's the Mishnah. It's a long Mishnah, and now we can analyze it. My ta'ama. The question is, what is the reason that I don't need a cesspool when I have a 16 square amot, and I can just throw my water right into my courtyard. Amar Abba, mipnei she'adam asui lehistapek satayim mayim bechol yom. So this is the standard amount of wastewater a person produces per day. Ba'arba amot adam roseh lezalefan, pachot me'arba shofchan. So if I have 16 square amot, then I like to have water there. I like to put sprinkled water on it to keep the dust down. Everything was made out of dust. So when something is a little bit moist, then I want the water to stay there so that it will keep it moist and keep the dust there down. So therefore, if it's 16 square amot, then the water is wanted on my property. And so I don't even if there's extra and somehow I don't intend for it to go into the Shut Harabim. So I avid uka share I la asir, and so therefore if it's less than 4 amot, pachot miken, right? So pachot ma'arba shofchan. If it's less than 4 by 4, then the place is not fit for sprinkling. What does that mean? If it's 4 by 4, I have a nice area. See, we're going to see that Rabba is going to require it to be square also. A nice area means I'm going to invite people, I'm going to put things out, I'm going to put some chairs out, and I want there to be no dust. So when it's 4 by 4, square and big, then I want the water there. If it's less than 4 by 4 or irregular, then I'm not really going to use it for a sitting area. I don't care how it looks. And therefore, when I pour it out, I don't want it to be there. I want it to just go away into the Shut Harabim. And so that depends on what one's intention is. And so the size will inform on the intention. That's Rabba's opinion, that 4 by 4 is good for sprinkling. And I want the sprinkling there. If it's 4 by 4, then it will absorb the water. See, according to this, it doesn't matter what shape or it is, right? Even if it's a weird shape and I'm not going to sit there, it doesn't matter. It will absorb, 16 square amot will absorb the water. Less than that cannot absorb that amount of water, and then for sure it's going to overflow. And then I will be causing it to carry into the Shut Harabim. All right, so that's the 2 opinions. And if we go back to the outline, here we have Rabba, and the Rabba says it's not needed. Cesspool is not needed if the water is when it's less than 4 by 4. The cesspool is. You need a cesspool if it's 4 by 4. You don't need a cesspool, not needed if water wanted to counter the dust. And the Bizarra says it's not needed if the water can be absorbed. Now we're going to have a challenge to Rabbah and then a challenge to Rabbi Zera. But don't worry, we'll answer them. Okay. But before that, my benaihu, what's the difference between them? Let's say if it's an irregular shape, let's say it's 2 by 8. So 2 by 8, no one's going to sit there, and so if it's dusty, nobody cares, and therefore I would still not be allowed to pour water there. I would need a cesspool. Whereas, according to the Bizera, that it absorbs, so 16 square amot, no matter what the shape, will still absorb that water, and so that would be permitted. So there's a real practical difference between them. Okay, so now for the question on challenge to Rabbah. Tenan, Chatzer v'achsadra mistarfin l'arba. This is from our Mishnah, the last paragraph of our Mishnah, which said that if I have a courtyard and a covered area, they join together. The floor area joins together to make 16 square amot. Right now we're assuming it's some kind of irregular shape, kind of like this. Right, here's my outdoor area, and then my indoor area is meets it at the corner. And so this is not good for a living space. No one's going to use it. And so this should not be okay, according to Rabbah, who says that it's for keeping the dust down. No one cares to keep the dust down in such a case. So the answer, Tidgema de Bizera alibad de Rabbah. The Bizera was a good friend. Even though the Bizera argued on Rabbah, he still provided an answer on behalf of Rabbah. All right, that's really nice when rivals can help each other. We're talking about that meets on the corner, but rather like this, where you have a nice big rectangle, and so the covered area goes across the entirety of it, or maybe the whole thing is a square. And so therefore the the whole thing is a square, and therefore the ground is 4 by 4, and part of it's covered, part of it's not covered, but it's still nice and usable, and you'd sit out there and want it to be presentable. And therefore you would want it to sprinkle water on it to keep the dust down. Okay, so there's no question from our Mishnah. Now we're going to ask a question the opposite way to the Bizera. Tashima, Chaser she'en ba arba amot, en shofchin letocha mayim b'Shabbat. This braita sounds very much like our Mishnah, except that it says a chaser that doesn't have 4 by 4. Right, so it seems to be specifically a square, 4 by 4, and if it's not 4 by 4, then I'm not allowed to pour water on it. Bishlam al Rabbanicha, that makes sense according to Rabbah, 4 by 4, a nice presentable area. If it's going to be 2 by 8, 1 by 16, then I'm not going to care about the dust. I'm not going to want the water for the dust. Ela Rabbi Zera kashya, but Rabbi Zera said so that the water will be absorbed. It shouldn't matter what the shape is. It doesn't need to be 4 by 4. So this is a serious question, and Rabbi Zera is not going to be able to reconcile this baraita with his own opinion. So instead, this opinion is actually Rabbanan. The Rabbanan in our Mishnah who said that I'm not allowed to pour things in a drain pipe, but rather have to put it on the roof itself, and it goes in directly into the drain pipe. Right. So that must be the opinion that this must be the opinion of Rabbanan, who are more stringent. Matnitin Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov he. Whereas our Mishnah, which said 4, but any shape, right? 4 by 4, any shape, 16, all is actually to be Eliezer ben Yaakov. And remember, right, the second paragraph of the Mishnah was to be Eliezer ben Yaakov. So he's saying just continue. The whole thing is to be Eliezer ben Yaakov. He said the same law regarding the courtyard and regarding the drain pipe, and he's lenient in both of them. Okay. So that's how we resolve this, but I thought that's the Rabbanan. Now we don't have to answer it. Okay. Why is Rabbi Zera so insistent? Like he's that the whole Mishnah should be Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. It doesn't say that. This just says Tanakama. It doesn't say it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Amarava matnitin keshite. No, the Mishnah had difficult language that he had to resolve. Ma'irya detani chaser shi pechuta. Litne chaser she'en ba'arba amot al arba amot. Remember when we first read the Mishnah, it says a chaser that's less than 4. Why use that language less than 4? Why not say 4 by 4? Oh, so you see that It's on purpose. This baraita says 4x4 has to be square. Our Mishnah doesn't use that language, which implies that it could be any shape. And that's what Rabbi Zera said. It has to be any shape, and therefore it's about absorbing. And therefore it has to be the more lenient opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. That's our conclusion. Now we have to read that into the rest of it. This does not a good reading because I have the first half of the Mishnah without a name, and then I say Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says as follows. Well, that implies that the first half was not Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. If you can introduce him only in the second paragraph, we answer Kula Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. In fact, both the first paragraph and that second paragraph are Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But you ask a good question, and we have to fill in some words to make it read smoothly. The Mishnah is missing words. It's not clear. Are we actually adding words, or we're just saying this is how you should understand it? It's more of an interpretation. Okay, if a courtyard is less than 16 square amot altogether, you cannot pour your wastewater there on Shabbat. If it is if it is 16 square amot, then you can. Why? I'm just adding the word she. The letter she. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer bi bakamur al ba'amot b'shut rabim shofchin etocho mayim b'Shabbat. Because Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said about a similar case that if I have a water channel, then and it's covered in the Shut Rabim for 4 amot, and the water channel goes into my area, I'm allowed to pour into it. And so now we are extracting from Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to another case of the courtyard. Also, if you add that she, then it reads very well. And the truth is, it is a good reading because these two cases really are basically the same thing, two applications of the same principle. Okay. All right. Now we have a quick note about the next part of the Mishnah. Let's go to our outline about the drainage pipe. We're going to mention that although we have two opinions there, Rabbi Eliezer says you can pour into the drainage pipe, and the Rabbanan says no, you have to pour onto the roof, and then it will go indirectly into the drainage pipe. There's yet a third opinion, Hananya, who's even more stringent than everybody. Okay, this is just a quick note. Matnitin de la Hananya. Tanya Hananya omer afilu gag me'a ama lo yishpoch lefi she'en hagag asur libloa ela lekaleach. Says you can't even pour it on the roof, even if the roof is 100 cubits, because the roof is not made to absorb. The roof is made so that it's going to run off into the ditch, and so therefore putting it on the roof is the same as putting a ditch, and it's all not allowed. Okay, that ends the short note. And now we get to the last section. It's a little bit complicated, but not too complicated. We're going to see a baraita that says a cesspool is not needed in the winter. So even if you have a small courtyard and it's less than 4x4, you only need it in the summertime when it rains a lot. In the summertime when it doesn't rain, right? In the dry season. But in cesspool is not needed. It is needed in the rainy season, right? In the summer when it rains. Okay. In the summer it does not rain, and I need the cesspool. The cesspool is not needed in the winter when it's raining anyway. There's so much rain, so I'm adding just a little bit more water there, so I'm not really adding much. So that's the idea. In the winter, when it's raining anyway, even if it's a small area, small courtyard, I don't need the cesspool. That's what the Baraita says, and we're going to see two explanations of it, and a lot of discussion of these. So Rava is going to say why. Because a person doesn't mind if water gets absorbed in the yard. When I have a small yard, and during the summer when it's nice out, then I want to use the yard, and I don't want it to get all wet and muddy. And so I don't want there to be. I'll put a little bit of water, right, because it'll get absorbed. But a lot of water in a little space will make it all muddy, and I can't use it. And so therefore, I don't want the water to be there. I want it to go away. Then it's not allowed. That's a problem. I need the cesspool. In the wintertime, it's raining so much, my little courtyard is always super muddy. And so therefore, a little more water, I'm not going to care about it. That's Rava's reasoning. Okay, Rav Nachman kind of rejects the Baraita. He says that you still need a pit. both in the summer and in the winter. It's just that in the winter, it doesn't matter what size it is. Even if the pit got filled up with some leaves and stuff, and it's not the same size, in the winter, it doesn't matter because there's so much rain anyway. There's always going to be more coming out. Okay, so that's the two opinions. And so let's see the discussion inside. Tana. When does the Mishnah say that I need to assess pool for a small courtyard? That's only in the summer when it doesn't rain. In the winter when it rains, I could keep putting more water and water in it, and even if it's small, I don't need a cesspool. Why? Because in the wintertime, I don't care. Not that I want, but more that I don't care if the water gets all absorbed, even in that little space, even if it's super muddy, because I'm not using it anyway in the winter. Abaye asked a question from the drain pipe. The drain pipe is pretty small, and no one cares. You don't use the area in the drain pipe. Also, you assume a drain pipe that's made out of earth and that it can absorb. And says, and in that case, I don't care how much water gets absorbed there, because I don't care for it to be nice and dry. I'm not going to sit there. And yet, according to Hachamim, I am not allowed to pour water into the drain pipe. So what's the difference between these two cases, the small chaser and the drain pipe? So what am I worried about? What would I be worried about in the chaser? It's going to get ruined. It's already ruined in the rainy season. So that's no difference. And the drain pipe also, I don't care if it's muddy in there. But here is the difference. If you're worried, that you might be worried that people will say, if they see water coming out of the other end of the drain pipe, they'll say, oh, I guess you're allowed to pour water in the drain pipe. Well, in the winter time when it's raining out, then it's always rain and the pipe is always has water in it. And so putting a little more water is not going to be suspicious. And the summertime, however, when it's not raining and all of a sudden your drain pipe has water coming out of it, everybody's going to say, oh, I guess you're allowed to pour water into a drain pipe. And so therefore, in the summer, I'm not allowed to pour water into the drain pipe. Whereas the courtyard in the summer, there's no problem at all because, so the winter time, there is no problem at all regarding in the wintertime, there's no problem at all regarding the courtyard because I don't care about, there's no gezerah, I don't have to worry about a gezerah, and I don't care what happens I don't care if it's muddy. All right, so we answered that question. Now, Madam Nachman says a different reason. Bimot geshamim uka machazik sa'atayim notnin lo sa'atayim machazik se'ah notnim la se'ah. Okay, it's not that you don't need a cesspool at all. It's just that in the winter time, we're less stringent about the size of it. If I had a cesspool that can hold 2 se'ah, then I pour 2 se'ah in it. If I have one that can hold 1 se'ah, then I pour 1 se'ah in it. In the summertime, I'm more stringent. If it holds 2 se'ah, fine, I can pour 2 se'ah in it. Se'ah and notnin lo kolikad. If it only holds 1 se'ah, then I can't use it at all. Okay, that's what the Baraita meant when it says it's more stringent in the summer than in the winter. Okay, now we wonder about this. Hold on, even in the summer, if it holds 1 se'ah of water, so let me pour out at least 1 se'ah. Why are you saying none at all? Gezerah dilma teli 10 se'ah time. Because the gezerah, if I allow you to pour anything in it, then you're going to pour more in it because the usual amount that the house needs is 2 se'ah. So what? So then in the winter, I should also make a gezerah. How come in the winter you said, if it's 2 se'ah, I could put 2 se'ah. If it's 1 se'ah, I could put 1 se'ah. Why don't you make a gezerah that I might put 2 se'ah and a 1 se'ah? So answer, what are you worried about in the winter? What, because you're going to ruin the dirt and it's going to get too muddy? Who cares? It's already raining. It's already muddy. If you're worried that people will say, oh, look, I see the water coming out the other side. I guess you're allowed to use gutters. So no, but it's rain in the winter season. I don't have to worry about that because it's raining anyway, and the water's coming out all the time anyway. And so therefore, in the winter, I can put one, even if it only holds one seah, I could put more in it, and nobody will worry about it. But I do need something. It just doesn't have to be the same size. Okay, good. Amar Abaye hilkach afilu kol afilu korayim. Abaye just says, if so, that as long as you have a cesspool, it doesn't matter what size, you can put as much water as you want. Then even if you put tons of water, yes, so you have a small courtyard and you have a little cesspool that's like filled up with leaves and stuff, and so there's not much room left. I can still put as much water as I want. And it says, yes, in fact, that would be the halacha according to the reason, according to this reason. All right, we finished that, and we just have the last section to go. I have two upper stories side by across from each other, and a small courtyard in between. And we said that only if I built the cesspool, I can use it, and you're not allowed to use it. Even if we made an eruv, still not allowed. Oh, that's interesting. Why? We made an eruv, right? We're here together. If you say, because now there's too much water, right? If the cesspool only holds 2 se'ah, I produce 2 se'ah, you produce 2 se'ah, now for sure it's going to overflow. It's too much water. You have to make your own. If you think that's the reason, it doesn't work. Achat li uka, v'achat li gistera, berecha v'areba, afa pi shenitmaleu mayim erev Shabbat, shofchin letochan mayim b'Shabbat. We have a braita that says all these types of water, collected water, even if they're already filled before Shabbat. Let's say it rained before Shabbat and my cesspool is already full. Doesn't matter. I'm still allowed to pour it in there. So you see, whether it's full or not, doesn't matter. I'm still allowed to use it. So therefore, if we made an eruv, and I made a cesspool, we made an eruv, so I used it, you use it, so what if it overflows? With this Baraita says it's okay, as long as, in theory, it can hold that much, it's okay if it overflows. Rather, Rava's statement, we're going to say the opposite. If he said anything at all, he must have said the opposite. It's only a problem if they didn't make an eruv. But if we did make an eruv and only I made a cesspool, we made an eruv, you can pour your water out as well. Okay, so now what's the difference? And if we didn't make an eruv, what would be the problem? You see, not actually carrying, you could just pour the water out the window. And so the problem is a gezerah that once, if I allow you to use my cesspool, then you're not only going to pour the water, on the roof and let it go out, but rather you're going to carry buckets out into the shared courtyard. And if we didn't make an eruv, you're not allowed to carry into the shared courtyard, and that would be a problem. So we're assuming that if I made it, it's on my side, and so then you could just pour water right out your door, and it will go right into my courtyard, whereas you are farther away from it, and so then you're going to be tempted to carry it in buckets, and then if we didn't make an eruv, that would be a problem. If we did make an eruv, then everything would be okay. Hadran alach kesad mishtatefin. Chazakim ubruchim. I'm completing rather difficult.